Okay, here we go.
Okay, so for just one more minute, okay?
Great. It says now streaming live on Facebook.
Yeah. I think we're live now. Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Kaarvan Crafts Foundation. As you all know, it's been an interesting 6 months since we started this, and we're now in our sixth month. And I thank you all for joining me. Um, there have been many themes that we've looked at during this series, but I think one of the things that has stayed consistent is that there's a strong need for Pakistan in general to really focus on innovation and have better design for products, for living, for our environment, in order to create sustainable ecosystems. So I'm immensely pleased to have here with me Safia Qureshi. Safia Qureshi is an architect and designer based in London. She founded Cup Club in 2015. Cup Club is the pioneer of reusability in consumer food and beverage packaging, having delivered the service at scale, commercially for major next-gen food and beverage brands. Key awards include Best UX Design 2019 Fast Company and New Plastics Economy winner from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Cup Club was born of Safia's interest in technology and design and how their intersection can boost the circular economy. She is passionate about empowering other founders, designers, and technologists, females in particular, to think circular. Safia, thank you so very much for being part of this.
Thank you for bringing me on, Samikum. Great to be here.
Now, Safia, one of the things that we've realized is that there are many models of business and many products in the market that have proven to be unsustainable. And that's really got a lot of people questioning how can they merge design and innovation. Generally speaking, the assumption is that it's the same thing. Could you expand upon that a little bit? How would you define design and innovation?
Right. So innovation typically means pushing it to a new extent or boundary. So design really is a mechanism to address a problem. So most designers will use creativity to solve it.
Yeah.
Design is a very wide industry. You've got everyone from, if you look at a design firm, you've got architects, you've got illustrators, textile designers. I mean, it's a big community of people. So traditionally, you use creativity to solve problems, the world's problems, as big and small as they are. Innovation is a slightly different segment on within that community. It's around the concept of new. So you are essentially looking at opportunities, whether it is
Sorry,
combining.
Sophia, we can't really hear you. Can you just increase the volume a little bit? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I can hear you really well, by the way. It's so clear.
It's just that your voice is a little
Better?
faint.
Is this better?
Better.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. So I would say innovation typically is pushing design to new frontiers or new boundaries. So it can sometimes be where you combine two or three new things which culminate in a different result. It might be looking at material innovation. So we all are very familiar with certain standard materials, but there's always more to explore. There's also biomimicry to take inspiration of and come up with new materials that are more sustainable. So I would say innovation is sort of your lab of design. So where most designers spend a lot of their times within their specific sector, whether you're a graphic designer, you get taught and then you come up with solutions to briefs. Innovation is a tier on its own where it's trying to think of how to solve problems, but with new techniques altogether. So how do you do that in a way where you're really rethinking some of the tools that you would normally use, which would be effective in any other scenario,
Yes.
but are not as effective. So that's really where innovation is. It's taking things to the edge, taking things to the boundary.
Okay, that's interesting that you put it when you say that taking things to the edge, because I think the latest innovation in Pakistan's context was actually getting rid of the plastic bag and bringing in fabric bags.
Okay.
You know, that's the level at where we are with regards to design and innovation. But how do you how would you apply innovation on a wider context, given Pakistan has so many issues concerning the environment and they're cropping up now? Where does one start? Does one start with looking at the environment, or does one start looking at things that are economically feasible? That's
That's
the
yeah.
dilemma that we're facing here.
Well, so they kind of all come hand in hand. You start with the problem. So what is the ultimate problem we're looking to solve? And there's some
Sure.
great methodologies that I use with the team, which IDEO came up with methodology in terms of design thinking. You sort of start from a position of how might we question, which is broad enough for you to not immediately think of one solution or two, but broad enough for you to bring in lots of research before you actually then synthesize into a solution. So you always start with a problem. What is a problem? Is a problem
Sure.
an abundance of single-use plastics in the environment? What type? And then if you are going to solve a problem, then why not look towards creating the largest and widest impact and selecting the key items that you see more prolifically in volumes versus the ones that you don't. So there are many ways that you can narrow your specific solution to tackling the problem, because they have to be multiple solutions tackling the same problem, right? And then it's the
Absolutely.
best one wins over time. So having multiple designers or multiple agencies or multiple consultancies or individuals come into a market and come up with a solution is a positive outcome, because then you have essentially healthy competition amongst them to then come up with the most superior version of them all. That's really how you want markets to shift. So when you're looking at the
Sure.
environment and you're looking at the shift between banning plastic bags is a great thing. The solutions are plentiful. You could say that there's a need for an immediate swap of one from one to the other. There's a lot of actually research that's done by the UN specifically on plastic bags. So they do say that the best type of reusable bag, if you're going to replace it, is in fact plastics that have been recycled into more durable reusable bags versus textile bags. Textiles has its own implication in terms of impact because of the material and how much water it takes to manufacture. So when you're coming up with solutions, like with any economy, I think we are in a position where we can learn from mistakes that are already
Mm-hmm.
been made, right? So that's one of the, I guess, virtues of an emerging economy like ours in Pakistan is there are plenty of examples that have already been experimented, plenty of data to give you clear indicators on which solutions have been tried, which are probably inferior, which ones are supported by immense data that are going to be superior. And so you can just, you can hurdle across some of the mistakes and issues that we've seen with certain options and go straight to the best ones, right? Why not? So learn from global, other global examples. So yeah,
Of course.
when you're talking specifically about this context, that's kind of my best example there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's definitely a need for Pakistan to learn other global practices. But at the same time, it's interesting because while there is a need for us to sort of up our game when it comes to technology, on the other hand, throughout this year, there's been a a cycle of motion has been put into place where people are sort of going back to their roots. So you mentioned textile. A lot of people have started setting up small businesses or preferring to buy and utilize items that are locally produced, which has sort of, cut aside imported goods, imported items, and there's this demand for local products. But the issue there is, Safia, that what's on offer in terms of textile or in terms of manufacturing, it's so outdated. It could be as simple as from buying, an everyday shirt to buying a lamp to buying kitchen utensils. Everything is so outdated that there's how does one sort of balance the need for modern items with traditional craft or locally produced items? That's where the gap is.
I mean,
I
a
mean,
gap, yeah. The thing is that gaps are fantastic. Gaps are really there to be filled by business. So if you're seeing a gap in the market, I mean, run for it. You're seeing a gap in the, that's excellent. I mean, that's good news. It's not saturated, but I would
yeah,
say, naturally, you have to also look at the market is clearly reflecting the demands of multiple personas, audiences. It's not just going to be a specific upper class requirement. It's you have distribution of products according to demand of the market. So if you see a gap that's specifically for a persona type individuals and there's enough there, then you can
yeah,
definitely start about thinking, okay, great, there's something for me to develop here. You can already identify a good business model around it. You can identify a good revenue runway around it. Then yeah, that's opportunity is fantastic. I think what happens in terms of struggle is usually the production side. So and we
yes,
have this problem here in the UK, right? So UK's production is incredibly woeful when you look at China. So we produce all our products in Shenzhen, which is the capital of manufacturing in China. So the lure of in terms of production, manufacturing, for scale, for just capabilities,
mm,
is on a different. It's on a different. It's just on a. It's just a different conversation that you're having versus what you might have here in the
absolutely,
UK. So,
yeah,
even with very mature markets that have, in fact, once upon a time were very strong with manufacturing, are nowhere near in terms of global scale comparison to the world's manufacturer, which is China. So if you want to try and produce things, you will find that you could potentially find them to a certain scale or to a certain price point, but it's very much going to be about testing it and seeing if you can get that made in the quality required by your main
sure.
consumers. So yeah, that's usually where it's a bit of a challenge. But if you see an opportunity in the market, then that's brilliant. It's great. It's not a saturated market.
It's not all doom and gloom when we see that there's these gaps and you're just sitting there thinking, what do we do now? That's an action opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So now here's the thing. You mentioned two very important things. You mentioned scale,
Yeah.
right? Scaling up your product in terms of productivity. On the other hand, if this year has shown us anything, there's always the risk, if I'm not wrong, from a business perspective, Safia, that if you design a product and you are putting it out there in the market, what if it doesn't sell? What do you do about your finances then?
So when you start a business, you have to assume for the first 3 years, if just in your mind, you just write off any sort of trajectory, which, yeah, you prepare yourself for the worst and you hope for the best. That's kind of the best
Yeah,
way that you can model. Um, Obviously, you'd need to raise capital to start, and if you have your own, excellent. I would always recommend using others. Where possible. So you're not sinking in, and this is for multiple reasons. So this is to do with the whole psychology of running a business. If you are personally have put in an incredible amount of your own capital, that will start to impact you emotionally in your performance, but also how you the dynamics, your psychological dynamics with your own team.
yeah,
Everything comes under a pressure cooker. So sometimes you have to think of it in a very detached way. Um,
yeah.
you have fiduciary duties as a business owner, and you have certain requirements of how to run a business. specifically if you're taking external investment. And you have to have a return for them at the end of the day.
Mhm.
But, don't use all of your own funding. Use a little bit just to show grit and that you are invested. But I would always say to people is when you're starting a business, don't quit everything you're doing immediately. Moonlight for a while.
Yeah.
That's how I did it. I sort of actually set up my studio while I was still working full time as an architect in a big commercial practice. And then I started Cup Club as a project in the studio, and then it spun out on its own as a startup, and then it got external investment, and then da 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 da. But I certainly didn't pack all my bags, quit the job, and sit down on a desk and put myself in this sort of spotlight. It's very hard to actually be able to do that. So you want to try and transition yourself because your journey from working from someone else for someone else to working for yourself is a very different evolution of your own personal being. So you want to allow yourself to
Absolutely.
transition through that naturally without, just in an organic way. It does take some level of
Absolutely.
discipline.
That's excellent, excellent advice. Now, Safia, before 2020, you were one of the first people that I know of who jumped onto the entire sustainable, bandwagon now, right? You were one of the first people to identify that, look, whatever product you create, that has to take into consideration the environment and it has to be sustainable. Now,
Right.
whether you look at Vogue, whether you look at the UN, whether you look at private businesses, everyone is now harping on and on about sustainable products. Do you genuinely feel that anything that is created now it has to be sustainable, or is there any chance of going back to the same modes of production and manufacturing and fast fashion?
So there's going to be there's no like on off switch to this. It's not
Right.
supply chains are a very slow beast. So supply chains, when you look at global supply chains, this is from everything, on in terms of a smartphone. How did I make this smartphone? Where
Yeah.
did the materials come from? These are very complex, um, you know, streams and there are many, many
Sure.
of them. For even one product, you can have a very complex supply chain. They move very slowly. They have an incredible complexity behind them. So there isn't an on and off switch. There is a very gentle process within which you can go, and it's very slow.
I was going
So
to say, is it gentle or is it slow? Because that's the fear that everything is now going to be slower and the impact will take, longer.
it will take longer to see. It will take longer to see. I mean, longer as in it will always, it was always going to take long to see. It's not something that can happen immediately overnight. The only things that happen immediately overnight is a
No.
number of things. So one is legislation and policy. So policy and legislation
Yes.
is something that we're
Yeah.
seeing, which is very much an on-off switch. So you can see regulation coming in, and they will give businesses 6 months to a year to conform. So they'll announce that, okay, we're going to
Yeah.
pass a new legislation that will kick off, let's say, on the 1st of January 2021. We're going to allow businesses by the end of that year to transition. So they all have effectively 12 months to figure out how they can go and sort out, elements of their supply chain or operating model to support legislation. They might ask
Sure.
for, I mean, certain businesses might ask for an extension or delay. Some businesses might ask for a
Yeah.
relaxation on whatever it is. So that's one way. So legislation and policy is definitely something that will speed it up.
Yeah.
Where it comes to the second, and this one is really interesting. This is consumers. So
Yes.
when businesses say, listen, we have this awful godforsaken product in the market because consumers want it, that's
Yes.
usually not very true, right?
Yeah.
And if tomorrow all those consumers decided this is a godforsaken product, we don't want it, that business 100% will change that product. 100% will change the product. They might spin
Absolutely.
off a story to say, we really want to be more sustainable and we've been thinking about this for a while, but really it's because those consumers woke up to and realized this was a godforsaken, awful product,
Sure.
and it doesn't match with our values anymore. It needs to disappear. So businesses, as much as I would like to say they're not virtuous, they are
Yeah.
shareholder driven and they are corporate entities. So the two very important things that change that is top down legislation or in
Yeah.
fact bottom up consumer. And that's
Right.
really what has changed everything over the last 3 years, right? So this drive on consumer awareness around the global issues is actually what's pushing everything from the bottom up. We see it from David Attenborough. We see it in news and media. We are becoming more and more clued up. We buy products. We're reading them for the first time. Also, we're seeing a lot more visual devastation of climate change across
Yes.
news channels everywhere. So it's consumers that are becoming more and more aware. So that's bottom up, and legislation, which is realizing, okay, we could be actually in a devastating situation in about 5 to 10 years. We need
Yeah.
to start to think about how we can legislate.
Yes. Well, now that things are becoming more towards, I mean, they're sort of evolving, right? So consumers, for example, instead of going out, there's more heavy traffic on the digital realm now, whether it's online shopping or online advocacy or even development. I mean, for example, for us, for Kaarvan, we've had to take all our work digital. So we're literally training rural artisans with little to no education how to be digitally literate. And it's fascinating to see that these are women who literally still use their thumbs to sign important documents, but they know how to navigate their way on Facebook.
That's,
And it's 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 amazing, but it's really fascinating at the same time.
yeah.
Do you feel that this kind of digital presence, it is going to increase? Of course it is. But do you feel that this is going to put pressure on businesses to be more aware of what they're selling and what they're putting out?
No, the increase in people becoming more digital natives is not going to not going to put pressure on businesses to become more sustainable. I would say it's a different wave of consumer demand. So you have sort of like this maturity that happens in a consumer from never having been online to being online to
Yes.
observing everything online and then to actually realizing, okay, I've kind of gone over the hump. I've got a,
Yeah.
I've reached my peak,
Yes.
peak online moment, and now, yeah, I kind of have more of a balanced approach to life, and
Sure.
sort of, you go through this process and journey over your own maturity. So the it will create a new wave in the same way as we're seeing it in China and a lot of other markets where a vast number of
Yes.
people, and in
Yes.
India, you saw the rise of TikTok
E-
in India. I mean, these people
Absolutely.
making videos, yeah, it's
And
amazing.
China's got one of the biggest markets. That was so
Exactly. So
surprising.
yeah, so the rising middle class, which is really what we're going to see, is the more people come online, I mean, technology has a way of enabling things to happen quicker. So things that would otherwise, everything from very simple administration to being able to um, access new services, new information, education. I mean, you're basically
Yeah.
priming a community of people to come within and grow into the middle class economy. Middle
Yeah.
class economy is going to then demand all kinds of new products and services, which the previous more mature middle class economy had the ability to access. So
Sure.
their demands are going to be mirroring pretty much everything and anything that was there previous. So the issue is actually the uptake for a lot of businesses is only going to exponentially increase. The only
Sure.
thing that will stop them from change, that will really force them to change, is going to be legislation, or that these new consumers are equally also exposed to this notion of what is good and what is not. That's a tricky thing to
Yeah.
tell or to know at this stage exactly how that will pan out for Pakistan specifically. But my guess is it's going to be difficult to manage, right? Because these are new, it's a new emerging community that want the same things that we had. So they might make similar mistakes. It's difficult to know. Mary, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry, there was a bit of a lag. So I
Uh,
was on my end. I was waiting for your you know, your audio to finish. We have a question here, Safia, for you.
okay, let's go for it.
Okay, this is you are an architect by training. Did it help you in any way in whatever you've endeavored afterwards? Has
Yeah,
being an architect helped you?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's my perspective on everything. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can see all the pictures, all the books behind me. These are all architecture books. Yeah, it's like your perspective on it's your lens. So studying architecture, it's at the top of the design pyramid, so it incorporates so many other design disciplines into one. So your training involves gosh, I mean, everything from the conceptualization to the actual completion of a built piece of construction, and the management of
But Sophia, do you not
everyone within.
feel that no matter what background you're from, ultimately, in order to survive, I mean, this is a whole new era in this planet's history where we really had to rethink our way of living and our relationship with the environment. So, do you not feel that everyone is sort of having to assimilate and look at everything through a similar lens of environmental impact, sustainability, economic impact, all these things? I feel like there's this generalization of how people are thinking, no matter what background you're from. Yes, of course, products are individual. For example, you have Cup Club. Cup Club is a unique concept, and I don't think anything of it is similar out here in the third world anyway. But now, do you feel that people are sort of assimilating and coming together and seeing through similar lens?
Yeah, I mean, now we have slightly other related issues with the buzz around sustainability um, being cool, right? So before it was something that a lot of people felt was too much hard work,
Yeah,
and it's something peripheral. Now it's becoming something that's culturally a new norm, coolness to it. With that, you get a lot of new individuals, new entrepreneurs who want to jump onto that opportunity and wave and ride it, right? So they are like, let's get in here, let's try and come up with systems and solutions to it. Some will be great, a lot of them will be inferior. A lot of them will be just pure marketing, very little science or data driven behind them. And so we're now seeing, I mean, certainly in this, our side of the world is a little bit more regulation and a little bit more thought in terms of not quite fact checking, but just analyzing businesses and checking their credentials and credibility before they're able to say certain things.
sure.
So you don't have greenwashing. There's sort of starting to pull out certain brands for overstatements, specifically around whether their product is sustainable. I mean, sustainable is a very broad word. Whether it's recyclable, and
Yes,
actually
it is.
holding them to
It is.
course.
I think people are still breaking it down.
Yeah, it needs to be broken down. So with this, we're going to see an evolution of lots of market saturation with options, and this will, to some degree, confuse consumers, excite consumers, and there'll be some recalibration that will naturally pull some of those that are misleading or inferior out and sustain the ones that are genuine and actually science backed and data driven.
Yeah,
So yeah, you will have an equilibrium at some point, but you'll have a lot of noise initially.
absolutely. Sophia, what does the future hold for Cup Club now?
So it's actually exciting. Cup Club is a product name, so we're developing of our brand, just sort of the holding company brand, which will be out in the new year. It's a lot of really exciting work that's being done on that at the moment. We've got new products that are going to be launched as well in Q1 2021 for food. So Cup Club is around distribution of beverages
Yes.
in a reusable system. We're doing something similar. We're producing one of our own products for the food to go space. So this is now direct to home delivery model where if you order anything, you get it straight in. You get the option of zero waste delivery and you get it straight and reusable delivered to
Sure.
your home. And then we have a system whereby we are able to collect that and redistribute. So eventually over the next year, it's going to be an exciting journey as we launch the more sort of movement up brand, which is the holding company umbrella brand, which then has a lot of our sub brands, Cup Club, the food one, which will come out. We'll announce that. So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, what we're noticing is that there is this year really sped. I would say between March and the end of this year, I would say that the momentum towards more sustainable thinking around packaging has actually increased. Um,
Yes.
Partially because of the slight downtime, it's enabled teams to internally think about strategy. And these are teams at major brands,
Sure.
across food and beverages. They've had the time to think about how do we reassess our strategy? How do we reassess?
Yes.
Um,
That's true for
yeah,
lots of organizations. Everyone's had to really sort of sit back and rethink, how do we move forward?
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
certainly true.
So yeah, we're
So
excited.
exciting times ahead for Cup Club.
It's exciting. Yeah, we're growing. I mean, we're focusing pretty much in the developed markets. We're not coming to Pakistan anytime soon, sadly. We're not. What one
That's a
day when we're
shame.
big enough, it will happen. I think our focus is on it's.
We definitely need something like that.
We do. I mean, we rely on digital natives, so everyone who uses our product has to have one of these. It has to, I mean, as in they need to be a real they need to be able to use the product, apps, etc., whether it's through payment. So we do need a large number
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
who are online. That's one of the most important parts. So we're building this and expanding to North America next year, and potentially Asia at the end of 2021. So we're getting there. It's
Good
slow.
stuff. Good stuff. Well, we're nearing the end of our session. So, Sophia, if there's anything I've missed out on pertaining to design and innovation, please enlighten us because you have so much to offer. And I feel that in Pakistan, the youth who are a lot more digitally savvy than, say, our generation, right? We're still sort of grappling with social media. There's so much that they want to do, but there's always this sort of gaping hole in terms of like, how do you go about it, how do you do it? For example, you mentioned having an app. That's something that a lot of young entrepreneurs need to get onto, creating their own apps, creating demand. How would you suggest that they go about doing that? Is it good PR? Do they need a stronger digital presence? Do they need to be more, I suppose, savvy in terms of selling their stuff? What is it that you would,
Oh, God.
what,
Well,
what would be your advice?
so starting a business is incredibly tough, right? There's so much that you have to, you start with zero. So, and in
Yeah,
2015, when we started this, nobody was, I mean, we heard crickets whenever we would approach people about
absolutely.
everything.
Yes, that's
And it
true.
was like, what are you talking about? So now it's a very different conversation. But like anything, and just context, we've never had PR, paid PR. We've never done
Yeah,
any PR whatsoever, and we've been in everything from Bloomberg, Forbes, City AM, BBC. I mean, just none of that has been paid. So if you're wondering how, that's just hustle. That's just getting
yeah,
your name, your story, your credibility. what I would always do is, and there are many different schools of thought here, is it doesn't matter what you're launching. It doesn't, I mean, whether it's an app, a product, whatever it is, remember that even if it's just your step one, if it's just your, minimum viable product, or, you're just testing it out, make sure it's good. Like
Yeah,
just make sure it's really good. It's really
yeah,
well executed.
absolutely.
Um,
Quality matters.
yeah, quality, it goes a long way. I mean, people underestimate. The thing is, when users are very fickle, so when something new comes up, you have the opportunity to pique their interest. Now, you give something that's new to someone, they'll try it out once or twice. So you have the shot. Just make
Yeah,
sure that you execute well, because no one's thinking, oh, this is just a pilot. Oh, this is just an, minimum viable product. Oh, this is just their version one. No consumer is thinking that. They're just
no,
thinking, oh, there's something new, let me try it out. So whatever it is, whether it's a physical product, it's a digital product, make sure it's executed very well. And user experience, so give it to people, try it, ask them to give you their feedback. User experience goes a long, long way. Put
yeah,
yourself in the shoes of the person who's using it. Try it out as though you don't know the product or the brand, and try and
no,
figure out how will they discover this, across what touch points is the normal place to look. And then on
absolutely.
the other side, on the selling, you just it's just the first couple of customers are always going to be the ones that get you to the next, and then those get you to the next,
Yes.
and then it's just slowly, slowly, slowly. But your first customers are not going to be glamorous.
Oh,
You're not gonna go from zero to having an article, in Bloomberg. So when people say, "Oh, well, you got an article with Bloomberg, with Starbucks and McDonald's," that 5 years in, that took a long time.
oh,
And that's actually their article. It mentions us. We we did not lead that piece of PR, hence why it's free. So it didn't say Cup Club launches in the Bay Area for Starbucks and McDonald's. It said Starbucks and McDonald's trialing Cup Club. So very different headlines. So
yeah,
just eat your humble pie. Let others take the show. Just make
yes,
sure you execute a really, really good product and keep
sure.
focusing on that.
Okay.
That's my best advice.
Thank you so much, Safia.
So
I
good to
think
see you. Good
good.
questions, as
Thank
always.
you. I try. It's hard keeping up with you, Safia, and your mind. So I really had to think long and hard. Like, how am I going to get the best out of her? Get her to talk
Oh,
as
really
much.
good session. I'm loving it. Really good. We should do more of these if you think
You
there's an
know what?
opportunity for some
I'd
other
love to have
time.
you on again. I would
Yeah, great.
absolutely. I think you right now, honestly, everyone who's watching, I've just touched the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
So maybe, Satya, we could consider having a second session, and this time
Sure.
have a lot more challenging questions for you as well.
Yeah, and some more designers, local designers. Let's see what we can do.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, like I said, there is people are doing something. They are trying, and there's definitely the hustle. But there's a lot of confusion in terms of, like you said, how to go about it. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, look, it's not about PR or marketing, which is how the local mindset is here. You've got to do PR, give out freebies, do your marketing. And what you're saying is completely different. You're saying that, look, focus on the product. It has to be good. Focus on the quality. Get out there, hustle, build a network, create an ecosystem.
Hmm.
And that, I think, requires a lot more direction.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can have you on for another session
Cool.
to talk
Yeah.
about all of this and sort of
Happy to.
really create a roadmap of how to do this.
Great. Happy to. Excellent.
Wonderful.
Well, have a
I'll
great
be in
week
touch then.
home.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care.
Sorry?
Guys. Good to see
You're
you.
both, okay. Bye bye, Safia. Thank you.
Bye
Good
bye.
to see you too. Bye bye.